Hey arcade hunters, my name is John. Welcome to my Gamester81 arcade show. This episode I visit Funspot Arcade. This is located in Laconia, New Hampshire. I visited PAX East Convention 2012 and decided to take the 2-hour trek north to this part of New Hampshire. I've never been to the state of New Hampshire before. Gorgeous state. I can see why people love it. And I'd never been to Funspot before, obviously, either. And really wanted to go to Funspot for the longest time, ever since I had seen the movie King of Kong several years back. You walk in upstairs, there's several stories to this. Upstairs, you had a King of Kong poster. That wasn't autographed. I was really surprised it wasn't, because as I said before, they filmed parts of King of Kong here, along with Chasing Ghosts, which is another great gaming documentary. Upstairs, you got games like Power Drive, there's Bagman, and Rescue. And there's 500 arcade games here. It's unbelievable. I spent all day at Funspot when I was here, and I still didn't have time to play every game. That game is Chiller. It's a really controversial game. It's a shooting game. You're supposed to shoot off people's limbs, and there's nudity, and it's one of the most graphic games. There's a Neogeo that's Nathan Barnett. This is his actual Neogeo from the Neogeo music video. He donated to Funspot, and he has a plaque there. There's only a few cocktail arcades, and cocktail arcades are called cocktail arcades because you can actually put a cocktail or drink on them, so kind of a table. A lot of times you find them in pizza parlors and areas like that, but there's several of them. There's Land, Sea, and Air. I hadn't played this game before going to Funspot. There's ACAM. It's actually located in Funspot. ACAM stands for American Classic Arcade Museum, so it is actual official museum. And a lot of people donate arcades. They don't only have just 500 plus arcade games on display. They have another 400 plus in storage that they don't have room for, which is amazing. You'll find some of the games are out of place, like Wacko right here. They don't obviously display the games like this. They're actually moving them back. What ACAM did, they took about 30 or so machines and brought them to PAX East for display, which is really neat. So this one, while I was here, they're actually in the process of putting them back. So you'll see a few arcades that may not be there in this video, or some that are simply just kind of out, like that one. There's a Mario Brothers that's out. Miss Pac-Man, Sinistar, some really popular classics, Moon Patrol. That's a Donkey Kong, same Donkey Kong machine that Steve Wiebe and Billy Mitchell broke their records on. So that was in the movie King of Kong. Brief history, that mini golf right there behind me in this video, that's a reproduction of the original mini golf. Funspot started in 1952, a different location by Bob Loughton. He's in his 80s, he's still there. There's some space upstairs for birthday parties and gatherings. I imagine this is a pretty cool place to have a birthday party. Right there is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, tucked way in the corner, away from everything else. That's one of my favorite beat-em-ups by Konami. Definitely a lot of fun. Against this wall, they have a whole bunch of cockpit sit-down games, some really rare ones as well. They have some really unique games here. This is Missile Command, a sit-down Missile Command. You got Monaco GP, Buck Rogers sit-down, Road Blaster sit-down. That's cool because it's got a magnifying glass and actually makes the screen look a lot bigger than it really is. It appears it to be anyway. Red Baron, another Atari Vector style graphic game. Sega Turbo, one of the first Sega racing games. Spy Hunter, ported to the NES, or Stun Runner by Atari. Star Wars, Cockpit. There's Star Trek Sit Down. That's one of my favorite Sega games. It's really cool, very unique one. Crazy Taxi, Afterburner. You can see they have a huge, and here's a cool, this is when you walk in upstairs, they have the display, Welcome to American Classic Arcade Museum. You got some really cool retro and vintage gaming memorabilia. You got an Atari Flashback and an Odyssey 100, some old TVs, Odyssey 2. On the other side, the same right in front of the cockpit games, you have some other stand-up games. Here's Forgotten Worlds, and you got Lock On. The camera is causing those lines to scroll. That doesn't actually appear in real life. Upscope, Commando, ported to NES, other games as well. Gunfight, that's an old game right there, one of the first games. Tetris by Atari, huge controversy with the Tetris. Atari had the rights to the arcade one, while Nintendo had the rights to the console one. Huge lawsuits back and forth. That's Space Wars right there, that kind of odd one we just passed. That's the very first stand-up video game or arcade game, which is pretty amazing. Cheeky Mouse, these are all Universal arcade games. Are kind of unique in design. Universal was probably one of the more famous games was Mr. Do, which is right there. That's actually in Saved by the Bell, if you ever watched that show back in the 90s. Smash TV, again, kind of rambling the place there. That's by Williams. One of the last Williams arcade games that they actually made was Smash TV, and that's a really fun one. It's almost like Robotron. If you're familiar with the classic Robotron, plays very similar. Huge room, aisle and aisles full of arcade games. You've got a number of pinball machines. Here's Hang On by Gremlin. Gremlin actually worked with Sega quite a bit. One of their more popular games they actually brought to North America was Frogger. Here is Astro Fighter, Russian Attack. There's Pong. Of course, a lot of us know Pong. Death Race, one of the most controversial games ever made. And that is a very rare cabinet. And it's basically the object of that game is to run over people in your car. So you can imagine how controversial that is. Here's my friend Eric playing some games. And also upstairs, I forgot almost to point out some of them. There's Hogan's Alley and that kind of, those are the dual versus arcade cabinet, kind of unique in design, very cool. You also got a Robotron there on the right on the right of that. There's Pong Doubles, which Pong was made by Atari, very popular in the arcades. So they had a handful of pinball tables, not as many as I would like to see. I heard at one point they had a bunch, but they put them in storage. There's Playboy. That's by Bally. If you look carefully at the marquee next time you see that, if you guys see that in person, there's actually an old lady in the hot tub with a whole bunch of beautiful women. Really funny they put that in there. Superman to the left there, that's by Atari. That's a wide body. Atari wasn't in the pinball business very long, but they did make Superman, and it's a decent game. There's Pinbot ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System. You guys might recognize that. Pinball up until the 70s was banned in the U.S. because the U.S. government considered it a gambling device, gambling machine, and they obviously took that ban off and became very popular in the 70s in the arcade scene. They really were before arcade games were really popular, and then up until the 90s, late 90s, they were really popular, and then they unfortunately kind of tailed off actually in the late 90s. So mid 90s, it was like the early 90s was really the peak of pinballs too. Got a handful of more classic games in the background by various companies. APS, there's some racing games. There's Race Driving and Hard Driving. I'm not sure if those are the same game or different names. I think they're sequels of each other. This concludes my part 1. I'll have continue this upstairs. There's pole position and part 2. So we got more machines to look at. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see you soon. Happy gaming.